All right, channel news. This week's episode, I'm going to mostly wing it. I did write a couple notes here, but it's just a thought experiment, okay? For those of you who don't know, I also have another channel where I use natural tools called Allergic Hobbit. Just type in Allergic Hobbit Knapping and you'll find it. And this channel started out named Allergic Hobbit, but then I changed the name to Jack Crafty so I could be more serious. And then I started another channel and gave that second channel the name Allergic Hobbit, and then posted only natural tools like antler and hammerstone and stuff like that type videos. Okay, so you can go watch that if you want to see what I've done in the past with natural tools. I get questions on the comparison between natural tools and metals, and it's hard to compare objectively. Although I have done it in a few videos, I get that question sometimes, and it's one of the hardest ones to answer because of one basic reason. Every napper develops a style, right? And that style exists whether you're using natural tools or metals. And you tend to nap the same way with both. So they're gonna look similar and you're gonna get similar results. And if you're not getting similar results, like if I'm not getting similar results between the two, my brain will try to make up the difference in what I need to do so that they do look similar. Okay, so it's not what I would call objective or unbiased. It's biased according to my particular style. So if I tell you that I'm having a difficult time with this as opposed to that, it could be that I'm trying to do a similar flake and it's harder to do with one material than the next. Okay. Now, when we get into the skill, I'm going to change the subject a little bit. When we get into the skill of napping, there are nappers that are extremely skilled. How much does that skill translate into what you can tell on the artifacts as far as how they were made, skill-wise? What level of skill and how skillful was the napper with particular tools? Now, you do gain insight into how they were made in the past by developing the skill of Flintknapping. But how much do you gain? Well, that depends on how well you understand logic, statistics, and just basic human nature. Okay? The solution that I think to figuring out how these things were made in the past is to come up with many different ways to do it and then say one of those ways might be the way, but we don't know which one. Instead of saying, well, I can look at an artifact and I can look at the flake, and by that flake and its characteristics, I can tell what tool was used and what the skill level of the napper was, because I can use that particular tool with a lot of skill to get that flake. Okay, that's the other argument. There might be another one in there somewhere, but for the most part, what I see is those who have skill will say or will claim that they know how to make that particular flake, right? And because they know that, they can look around and see, that artifact has that flake made with that tool. Oh, and that artifact has that flake made with that tool. That artifact has a flake made with a pressure flaker of elk antler with a pointed tip. And that artifact has a flake made with a elk antler pressure flaker with a pointed tip, because I can get that same flake. Okay, there's two problems with that. One, you can't prove it, right? And number two, it's a hasty generalization, which means that you are taking a few examples and then generalizing it to more than just those artifacts, because what you're implying is that any artifact with that particular flake or that particular look to that flake will be that type of technology where that tool was used. All right? It's a hasty generalization, because I've shown that you can make the exact same flake with more than one method, more than one tool, etc. Okay, there's more than one way to make that same flake that has a substantial or significant difference in the skill or the learning curve. All right, so the best you can hope for, in my view, is a 50% chance of being correct on a particular flake. There's at least two different ways with two different, significantly different methods to make that flake. All right, that's my opinion. I say opinion because that can be updated. I don't stick to that as if it was written in stone, so to speak. I put that out as a hypothesis that can be challenged or improved upon, or both. Okay? So, what's the moral of the story? Why do I even get into this sort of thing? It's because it is something that we all have to deal with in life. This notion that someone can create a narrative or create a situation where people can believe something that isn't true. And it's very convincing, if you're skillful, to say that I know how that was made. But the whole idea behind that is dubious, okay? Yes, people with skill can understand how to make artifacts better than people who don't have any skill. Yes, but how far does that go? It doesn't go all that far. And I've got a little thought experiment just to beat the dead horse again, just to get a better idea of what I'm talking about, okay? Let's do a thought experiment. Okay, let's say that I create a bunch of different points using different methods at the final stages where you can see the flakes, okay, with all natural tools. Stones, antlers, and bones, and maybe a little piece of copper every now and then, because there was copper back in the day, okay? And things that are found in nature. Yes, you can find copper in nature as nuggets and so forth. You can even knap with meteorites if you're lucky enough to find one. But what I'm talking about here is just me creating a bunch of artifacts or a bunch of points using different methods with natural tools, okay? So I got about 20 or maybe 100 sitting out in front. I don't have time to make that many, but let's just say that I did. All right, and then I filmed each one in a video, so you know exactly how they were made, okay? And then on every remaining flake on each artifact, I label it in a drawing. I make a drawing or a photograph of each artifact, each side of the artifact, and label what's what. This was made with that kind of tool, that was made with that kind of tool. Everything's labeled, okay? And then take a photograph of the edges and show you this was made with aggressive pressure or passive pressure, or percussion with indirect or direct on edges, and get zoomed in and all that, and get everything perfectly labeled and documented, okay? All right, the next step. Let's say I throw in some tools that I didn't use, that maybe look like knapping tools, but I didn't use, or they are knapping tools in other parts of the country or parts of the world, but I didn't use them. But I put them in anyway, just so I can say that I'm going to make it a little more difficult on you, all right? And then And then, just for good measure, I want to delete everything, all the videos, all the proof, all the documentation. Who would be able to recreate all the documentation accurately? I mean, I would know because I did all the documentation. I'd have it in my memory. So I could see which person was correct and which was not correct and how they would perform. Do you think anyone would be able to pass the test? Assuming that I was completely honest. Okay? You know the answer to that. The answer would be no. And even if they did, let's just say by some miracle they were able to reproduce all the data. I give them as long as they want. They were able to recreate all the drawings, right, with the proper labeling and the proper tools. The videos, you can't recreate those, but they might be able to show methods that I used, and let's say that they got every method correct. Let's just say all of that was correct. Everything. How can you prove that that was correct? You can't. So even if they could recreate it perfectly, how much benefit is that to us when you can't prove it? That's the dilemma we have with artifacts. Anything anyone comes up with cannot be proved. That's our dilemma, okay? And chances are they didn't get it right. And chances are very good they didn't get any of it right. Because I could have lied to you and said I made them with natural tools of different types and just made them with one tool set with just one method. Okay, and then you are trying to scramble around trying to figure out what other tools I'm using. Okay? So we don't know what we're dealing with as far as tool sets. We don't know if some of the tools included in the tool set are actual tools or not, or if there's some tools missing. All the data is missing. There's no videos of it in the past, of what they did in the past, and none of these artifacts are labeled with labels on how they made these flakes. And there's no record of it anywhere. Okay? That's what I'm getting at. When someone tells you how they were made, they have to deal with this scenario. Now, some people don't think about this type of scenario and they get fooled. They get fooled or dazzled by the skill of the napper. Yeah, it doesn't count for much. Not if you want to be scientific. Now, if you want to be political and gain favor by any means other than merit, okay, maybe you respond to political type of influence. Nothing we can do about that except point you out and say that's not a good way to look at things. All right? Okay. I think I beat that one enough. I beat that dead horse enough. Yeah, I think. I'll probably come up with something else. I'm a little sleepy. Yeah, I'm actually a lot sleepy. I didn't get much sleep this week. So I didn't go into too much depth on the question and answer stuff. I just had that one particular one. How do you know how it was made when you have skill? And the answer is you don't. Okay? Let's see. If you don't know, this is another, I'm changing the subject again. If you don't know my channel, just go back and look and you'll see that I've used different types of metals and different tools along the way. I've been doing this for a while, since 2011, on video. I was able to knap effectively in 2009, but I didn't start posting videos until 2011. In 2010 is when I invented the behind the knee technique that I use. It's my own technique. No one was using the behind the knee so-called technique. They were using other indirect percussion methods, but putting the flaker behind my knee and holding it that way is my invention, in case you didn't know. Okay. There are other ways to do indirect percussion, and the way I use indirect percussion is horizontal, but there's vertical as well. Okay, if you see someone hitting a core with a punch in the vertical position, that's vertical indirect percussion. If you see someone hitting a core or a biface or anything else and hitting it this way to remove a flake from this end here, hitting it that way, this is a horizontal punch. So there's a vertical punch and a horizontal punch. Now, can you have hybrids? Yeah. I know you didn't ask that question in your brain, but yeah, there's a hybrid method where it looks like a horizontal punch, but you're hitting the end of the punch to produce a flake. That's a hybrid. That's not a horizontal or a vertical. It's most like a vertical. If you hit right where you're removing the flake, that's a lot like a vertical punch. It's not quite a vertical punch because it doesn't have the compression of a vertical tool. This will compress more than this little area. So it's slightly different in the compression. But this, I call that a hybrid technique where you hit very close to the end. Okay? I don't use that and I don't use that. I don't use the vertical or the hybrid. I use the horizontal, which means I'm back away from the point of impact, and this has a tendency to flex slightly. Okay? Now, some tools that I use do not flex at all, but some of them do, and I do take advantage of the flex sometimes. When do I take advantage of that flex? Whenever the material is cooperative. Like some material, especially Obsidian, if it's a little bit flexible, it allows you to run longer flakes. On tough material, it's just hard to run long flakes no matter what. So I just opt for a very strong horizontal punch. It does have some flex, but very little. It could be considered a hybrid if it's too stiff to bend when I hit the horizontal punch. Okay? It could be considered a hybrid as well if there's no flex. Now, I call my punches supported horizontal punch because after you make the strike, it's still held or supported. You can also have a horizontal punch where it's backed up to something or leaning on something and hit it and it falls away. You have to reposition it and hit it and it falls away. That's an unsupported horizontal punch. Okay? Supported means you hit it and it still has a support mechanism, either someone holding it or some other thing holding it, or it's stuck in the ground with a stick. Something is holding it so it doesn't fall away after hitting. Now, who uses the fall away type of horizontal punch? The first person I saw using it was a guy called Jim Wynn. His channel was Paleo Man Jim, and there are others that also used it. And some of the horizontal punches had notches in them, some didn't. The fall away type. With my horizontal punch, I don't have a notch in the tip. Some of the fall away horizontal punches, they required a notch mainly for seating. You had to seat both ends of the punch, one on the tool and one on a support, and then you hit it. So it was advantageous to have a notch. I don't use notches in my horizontal punches. In fact, I prefer it to be perfectly semicircular or a little bit flattish in either that way, in that direction, or in this direction, like a 45-degree angle. One of those two configurations, or just semicircle, rounded, perfectly rounded. Now, I also use pointed horizontal punches, either with metals or natural materials. And I have used indirect percussion for notching with a spatula tool type of tip to notch with. I keep getting sunlight on my face, that's why I'm backing up a little bit. And that sort of thing, okay? In case you're wondering, What else can I ramble about? I hope this microphone is working because it costs a pretty good amount. It is pretty cool. I've got 2 of these, so maybe I'll have an assistant one of these days. Who knows? Yeah, I was gonna have a bunch of Q&A questions, but I don't have anything written down. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. Yeah, and that sunlight is really distracting me, so I think I'm gonna stop the video there. It's 20 minutes. One more chance to think of something. I get a lot of questions, but mainly they're just repeat questions. I'm trying to think of, did I get any original, never before asked questions lately? Other than the silly ones. I can't think of any. All right, that's it.